Ever have one of those days, or maybe one of those weeks, where you're just so busy, but at the end of it all, you're kind of like, what did I actually accomplish? You're feeling overwhelmed, your to-do list is a mile long, but you're just underwhelmed by the results. If that sounds even a little familiar, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to dive into something called essentialism. It's this powerful idea all about how to do less, but way better. Okay, so here's what we've got on tap. First, we're going to look at this weird trap called the paradox of success. Then we'll get right into what essentialism actually is and its super practical three-step method. We'll also clear up how it's different from minimalism. That's a common question. And then, the fun part, learning how to say no without feeling guilty. And we'll wrap up with what it really means to live a life by design. All right, let's kick things off with a pretty wild idea. How is it possible that the very thing that makes you successful could also be the thing that leads to your downfall? I know it sounds strange, but it's a trap that so many of us fall into. Okay, look at this image here. Does that chaotic scribble feel familiar, like at all? That's what your energy looks like when you're caught in the non-essentialist trap. You're pulled in a million different directions, making an inch of progress here, an inch there, but you're not really getting anywhere meaningful. This is pretty much the poster child for feeling spread too thin, and it's right at the heart of this paradox of success. And here's how that trap works, broken down into 4 phases. It's so simple, it's scary. Phase 1, you have total clarity of purpose. That focus leads to success. Awesome, right? But then phase 2, success brings you more options, more opportunities. Everyone wants a piece of you. You become the go-to person. So phase 3, your efforts get diffused. You're trying to do everything, please everyone. And that leads directly to phase 4, you completely undermine the very clarity that made you successful in the first place. It's this crazy, vicious cycle that feeds on itself. So the big question is, how do you break out of that cycle? Well, that's where our solution comes in, essentialism. And let's be super clear, this isn't about getting more done. It's about getting the right things done. And this image just nails the difference, doesn't it? On one side, you've got that scattered, non-essentialist energy. But on the other side, wow, that's the essentialist. All that same energy, but it's focused, it's channeled into one powerful arrow. You're not just making inches of progress in a million directions, you're making miles of progress in the one direction that actually matters. Okay, so what is essentialism officially? Here's the definition. It's the discipline of continuously defining where we can create the most value, then finding ways to execute most effortlessly. Let's pull that apart. Discipline is key, because this doesn't just happen by accident. And most value, that's the whole game. It's about finding where you can make your biggest impact, not just ticking off boxes. It's a system, really, for figuring out your absolute highest point of contribution and then making it as easy as possible to deliver on that. Honestly, if you forget everything else from this, just remember these 3 words: less, but better. That's it. That's the whole philosophy in a nutshell. It's your new mantra for pretty much everything in life, choosing quality over quantity always. All right, so we get the what. Now let's talk about the how. How do you actually start doing this? Well, it breaks down into a really simple 3-step method. Now, the first thing to get is that this isn't a one-and-done kind of deal. It's a cycle, something you do over and over. You explore, you eliminate, and then you execute. Explore, eliminate, execute. It's a continuous process of refining and refocusing your energy. So step 1 is all about exploring and evaluating. This is where you have to consciously pause and ask yourself, am I actually investing my time and energy in the right things? Instead of just reacting and saying yes to everything, you're taking a step back. You're trying to find the vital few from the trivial many. You're basically becoming a detective, separating the real signal from all the noise out there. Okay, now for step 2, eliminate. And let's be real, this is often the toughest part. This is where you have to be ruthless. You have to start cutting things out. And yeah, that even means cutting out some good opportunities to make room for the great ones. The most important thing here is giving yourself permission. Permission to stop trying to do it all. Permission to say no. And that brings us to step 3, execute. Once you've explored your options and eliminated the junk, you're left with the essential stuff. The goal now is to make doing that stuff as effortless as possible. This is all about removing the friction. You build systems, you create routines, you remove obstacles, whatever it takes to make doing the most important thing the path of least resistance. So, as we're talking about this, you might be thinking, wait a minute, this sounds an awful lot like minimalism. And you know what? You're not wrong. They're definitely related. They're like cousins. But there's a really important difference that we need to clear up. Here's the simplest way to think about it.
Minimalism is mostly focused on your things, your physical possessions, getting rid of clutter in your house. Essentialism takes that same core idea of less but better and applies it to, well, everything. We're talking your time, your energy, your commitments, your whole life. But even with that difference, they are absolutely kindred spirits. I mean, look at the values they share: simplicity, intentionality, focus, freedom. Both are pushing you toward the same goal: living a more deliberate life and focusing only on what truly adds value, whether that's a thing in your closet or a meeting on your calendar. Okay, if you really want to live an essentialist life, there's one skill you absolutely have to master. And that skill is the power of saying no. So let's get into the mindset you need and then some practical tools to actually do it.
It all starts in your head with a pretty fundamental mindset shift. You have to trade these false assumptions for some core truths. So instead of thinking, I have to do this, you start thinking, I choose to do this. That's huge. Instead of it's all important, you recognize, nope, only a few things really matter. And my favorite, you ditch the idea that I can do both and embrace the much more powerful truth: I can do anything, but I can't do everything.
So with that mindset, here's your practical toolkit, your no repertoire. Because you don't always have to be harsh. Sometimes all it takes is an awkward pause. Just silence. It works wonders. Or you can use a soft no, but you can buy time with, let me check my calendar and get back to you. And for work requests, this one is gold. Yes, what should I deprioritize? It immediately forces the other person to recognize that your time isn't infinite and that every yes is a no to something else. So after all this work, all the exploring, the eliminating, the executing, what's the big payoff? What do you get? Well, in a word, it's control. It's about taking back the reins of your own life.
And this quote just sums it up perfectly. The way of the essentialist means living by design, not by default. Think about it. So much of our lives are spent just reacting, living on autopilot. Essentialism is the alternative. It's about consciously, deliberately designing the life you actually want, instead of just drifting along with whatever comes your way.
Okay, let's wrap this up with the key takeaways. Number one, you have to accept that almost everything is just noise. Your job is to filter all that out and find the very few things that are truly essential. Number two, and this is so important, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. Trust me. And finally, the big reward. When you do this, when you focus on what matters, you build a life of meaning and purpose, a life without regret.
Look, every single decision we make is a trade-off. You just can't have it all. And we're so conditioned to see that as a loss, right? We ask, what do I have to give up? But essentialism completely flips that on its head. It reframes the question. It's not about scarcity and loss. It's about focus and abundance. It's not about what you're giving up. It's about what you're choosing to go all in on. So the essential question isn't, what do I have to give up? The real question is, what can I go big on? That's it. That's the question that changes everything. Because when you say no to all the trivial stuff, you create the time, the energy, and the space to go absolutely massive on the few things that really matter. So as we finish up here, I just want to leave you with that question. What is your highest point of contribution? What is the one thing that you can go big on?